There's something happening inside the moon, something that nobody expected. Not a dramatic shift you'd see on the outside, but deep down, where things seem frozen in time, scientists have uncovered a hidden layer of what you could only call moon goo. Remember those school lessons about the crust, mantle, and core? Much like the Earth, the moon is made up of layers: a crust, mantle, and core. However, the moon's core is much smaller compared to ours. Earth's core is huge. It makes up about a third of our entire planet's mass. The moon's core makes up only about 1 to 2% of its mass, and its diameter is about 1/5 the diameter of the moon itself. It's surrounded by a hard, rocky mantle. But it turns out that between these two layers, that mysterious goo layer, and it's way more important than you might think. The layer is soft and partially molten, ebbing and flowing like the tides in our oceans. It rises and falls, stretching and shifting as if it were alive. Its movement isn't chaotic, but subtle and regular. We always knew that the moon influences our seas and oceans, causing tides with its gravity. But it turns out that we influence it back. The goo ocean reacts to the gravitational dance between Earth and the Sun. Also, the molten layer could be made of ilmenite, a very intriguing material. Ilmenite is rich in titanium, a strong and lightweight metal that we really love over here on Earth. Titanium is used in everything from airplane parts and spacecraft to medical devices, even in everyday items like bikes and laptops, all because it's incredibly strong and very resistant to corrosion and heat. So, if the moon might have a molten layer rich in ilmenite, that would be awesome. Astronomers are already planning for lunar bases, and if we had a material to build structures, spacecraft, or even tools for astronauts right there, that would be a game changer. Otherwise, we'd need to transport materials from Earth, which is extremely costly. This is our first tangible sign that the moon is not just a cold, boring rock. Instead, it's dynamic, living, and breathing, with moving forces beneath the surface. NASA used new special tools to discover this: the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. These are both space missions designed to study the moon, but they don't just look at the surface like a telescope. Instead, they help measure things we can't see with our eyes, like the moon's gravity and how it changes over time. Grail sent 2 small spacecraft around the moon named Ebb and Flow. Clever. The idea was for these spacecraft to fly close to each other and measure tiny differences in the moon's gravity as they go. It's like they were feeling the moon's invisible pull in different places. If the moon's gravity was stronger in one spot, the spacecraft moved closer together, and if it was weaker, they moved farther apart. This helps scientists understand what's going on inside the moon, even if they can't actually go there. And the spacecraft intentionally crashed into the moon in December 2012 to end the mission. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is a bit different. It takes super detailed pictures of the moon and collects other important information about its surface. By combining the information from both Grail and LRO, we were able to find this goo layer. But this discovery actually challenges everything we thought we knew about lunar geology. How did this molten layer get there? How long has it existed? And perhaps more fascinating, how it stayed warm for millions of years? That's some million-dollar questions. The moon's core generates heat just like ours. But it's not as easy as saying, oh, the core's heat probably keeps it warm and molten. Well, first, the moon's core is much smaller and less active than Earth's, meaning it produces significantly less heat. Plus, the moon is much cooler than Earth in general. With temperature dropping to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, how could this inner layer still stay in this flowing state? That's still a mystery. In any case, this goo could actually explain a lot of stuff about the moon. For example, astronomers were exploring moonquakes and how they happen. Now they think that it might be this semi-molten layer shifting and moving beneath the surface. Now, beyond the moon itself, it also tells us more about other celestial bodies. If the moon, something we considered basically a huge static rock, has such a dramatic life, what about other planets, moons, or asteroids? Could they also hide similar hidden movements beneath their surfaces? We can even understand our own planet better, learn more about how tides and similar stuff works. There are so many great discoveries we've been making on the moon. Recently, we found some awesome stuff beneath the surface. Massive caves hidden for millions of years. For over 50 years, scientists have suspected that the moon's surface is full of underground tunnels and caves. These are known as lava tubes because they were formed by lava. Duh! Millions of years ago, the moon was pretty unstable. It underwent some volcanic activity, causing eruptions. When a volcano erupts, lava can flow across the surface. As the outer layer of the lava cools and hardens, it forms a solid roof of dark material. It's actually what these famous dark spots on the moon are. These are dark, hardened remains of ancient lava. But the hot, molten lava continues to flow through the center. Once the eruption ends and the lava drains away, what's left behind is an empty hollow tunnel, hence a lava tube. On Earth, we have lava tubes in places like Hawaii or Iceland, where volcanic activity has created similar underground tunnels. The same thing happened on the moon billions of years ago, although they're much crazier compared to ours. In fact, lunar lava tubes are now thought to be some of the largest and longest in the entire solar system. One such cave was discovered beneath the famous Mare Tranquillitatis, the place where Apollo 11 first landed, and it's at least 340 feet deep. Now, all these lava systems have remained hidden just beneath the surface, untouched for millions of years. Only now, they finally managed to prove their existence. Scientists from the University of Trento in Italy found them using special radar technology and advanced computer methods. These techniques let you see underground by sending radar waves. The waves bounce back and give clues about what's hidden underneath. By analyzing the way these waves reflected back, the researchers could detect the shape and size of the hidden caves. Now, the best thing about this discovery is that we could build all our bases there. These caves protect from radiation, harsh winds, and meteoroids. NASA even found evidence that some of these caves stay at a steady 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's some crazy coziness for the moon. And on top of that, there could even be some water there. So humans could take shelter inside these natural tunnels and build entire colonies on the moon. And I know what you're thinking. Could unexpected lunar monsters hide deep in those caves? Well, sure. There's a huge potential for exploring these caves and finding some awesome stuff. But even if we manage to find a miracle, like small life or microbial organisms, there's a 99% chance that there won't be actual animals or monsters. It would just be impossible for them to develop in such conditions. But it would make a great horror movie. Researchers want to send robots or drones to explore the tunnels first, and then see if they're safe enough for humans. And it's not just the US getting in on the action. China is also investigating the possibility of using these moon caves as a future base, showing that the race to explore and settle the moon is heating up.
Something unusual has been spotted on the moon, and it's getting attention for a reason. New high-resolution observations linked to NASA's Artemis program revealed areas where the lunar surface appears to have shifted, cracked, or partially collapsed. In some images, it even looks like a section of the moon has broken away. At first glance, this sounds extreme. The moon is usually described as geologically inactive, a stable and unchanging world. But the data tells a different story. Certain regions now show surface features that were not clearly visible in older imagery, suggesting relatively recent changes. The key to understanding this lies in how the moon actually evolves. Even without plate tectonics like Earth, the moon is still slowly changing. One of the main reasons is temperature. The lunar surface experiences extreme swings from about 120 degree Celsius during the day to 130 degree Celsius at night. These rapid changes cause the surface material to expand and contract over and over again, gradually weakening rock structures. Over time, this leads to cracking. Another major factor is the moon's internal cooling. As the moon slowly loses heat, its interior contracts. This process creates stress in the crust, forming features known as lobate scarps, which are essentially small cliffs or fault lines. Data from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has identified thousands of these structures, some stretching for several kilometers. What makes them important is their age. Many of these scarps appear relatively young, which suggests the Moon is still tectonically active on a small scale. There is also direct evidence of seismic activity. Instruments left on the surface during the Apollo missions recorded moonquakes with magnitudes up to about 5.0. These are strong enough to shift surface material, especially in areas where the ground is already unstable. Recent analysis shows that some of these lunar faults may have been active within the last 50 million years, which is extremely recent in geological terms. In some regions, boulders up to several meters in size have been observed at the base of cliffs, likely dislodged by seismic activity. Computer models suggest that even a moderate moonquake could trigger cascading rockfalls across unstable slopes, especially near the lunar poles where future missions are planned. This means that what looks like a small surface crack in satellite images could actually be part of a much larger and ongoing structural shift. In several locations, high-resolution images show slopes that appear to have partially collapsed. Loose material has moved downhill, leaving behind fresh-looking surfaces that stand out from older terrain. In some cases, this creates the visual impression that a chunk of the Moon has broken off. In reality, these are most likely landslides or regolith movements triggered by moonquakes, temperature stress, or both. Micrometeorites add another layer to the process. The Moon has no atmosphere, so even tiny particles strike the surface at high speeds. Over time, these constant impacts disturb the upper layer of dust and rock, making it easier for material to shift when other forces act on it. All of these factors combined make the lunar surface more dynamic than it appears from Earth. For scientists, this is not just an interesting detail, it has practical implications. Missions like Artemis are focused on long-term exploration, including future landings and potential infrastructure on the Moon. Understanding which areas are stable and which are prone to change is critical. Regions with active fault lines or loose surface material could present risks for landing spacecraft or building equipment. That is why updated mapping and continuous observation are so important. At the same time, these changes provide valuable scientific insight. They show that the Moon is not completely inactive. It is still evolving, slowly reshaping its surface through small but continuous processes. The idea that a massive piece of the Moon suddenly broke off is not supported by current evidence. But smaller-scale changes are happening, and they are measurable. And in some cases, they can look dramatic enough to raise new questions. Because when we look at the Moon with higher precision than ever before, we are starting to see something unexpected. A world that seemed frozen in time is still changing.
Sometimes, when you look at the Moon, you see a face smiling down at you from the Moon's surface. Of course, this is an illusion, but many people see it, and that's because its surface is shaped by some sort of lunar seas and highlands. From our point of view, we see these as light and dark patches. These seas are dark parts, and large hardened lava plains formed because of volcanic eruptions that happened a long time ago. The light regions are actually the mountains and the highlands. And people all around the globe see these lunar patches as a smiling face or even some other shapes. Our brain tends to play with things of this nature, and that's a phenomenon called pareidolia. It's when you see familiar faces and shapes even though they're not actually there, similar to how you can see a face in a slice of toast or shapes while watching the clouds. And in the northern hemisphere, people see a face in those different lunar seas. The eyes are the sea of serenity and rain. The sea of clouds represents his mouth, while the seas of islands and vapors form his nose. But that's just one way to interpret this picture, and that mostly works in the northern hemisphere. If you live in the southern hemisphere, you see the Moon the other way up. When they look at the Moon, some see a person that looks like they're carrying a bundle of sticks. Or there's the shape of a woman, She wears her hair up and it has 2 jewels in it, and they see the left side of her face in profile. One of the craters is reminiscent of a shining diamond which, it seems, she's wearing around her neck. In some places, people may see the shape of a rabbit, whereas people from the Pacific Northwest in America even have a story about the toad they see when looking at the moon. The story says there was a wolf that fell in love with a toad, and the toad didn't quite trust the wolf since it wanted to escape and didn't know where. It simply made one huge leap and landed on the moon. Now, do other planets have beautiful rainbows like we do? The ingredients for that are raindrops and sunlight. At the moment, we don't know of a planet with liquid water on its surface, and none have enough water in their atmosphere to make it rain. But droplets of some other liquid could refract light coming from the sun and spread it out into various colors. Titan is one of Saturn's moons, and the atmosphere there is rich in droplets of liquid methane, which probably form rain. The atmosphere on Titan is very hazy. That means that direct sunlight is not that common, but there's still a slight chance we could catch methane rainbows someday. If they really exist, they'd be similar to rainbows on Earth, but they'd be a bit broader because methane refracts light differently than water. There's a similar thing on Venus called glory. Scientists caught pictures of this optical phenomenon of sunlight falling on sulfuric acid droplets, similar to a rainbow. Jupiter is insanely big, around 11 times wider than Earth. Not only that, our planet is twice as small as its Great Red Spot, the raging storm that's been present on the planet for more than a century. Now, we owe Jupiter a lot. Its radiation is 1,000 times stronger than the lethal level for us, and the gravitational force is so powerful that it actually protects our planet from collisions. In some other planetary systems, giant planets like Jupiter can move around and migrate from the place where they were originally formed. They spiral inward and get closer to their stars. When they move around, they can cause a lot of trouble. When they get closer to their stars, they can swallow and destroy some innocent small planets or other celestial bodies that stand in their way. But if these giants remain far away from their stars, they serve as guardians of the planetary system. They protect the planets in the inner orbits and allow them to circle around a central star. Jupiter got the nickname vacuum cleaner of the solar system because it can eat up any comet or asteroid that comes close enough. It can also change their orbits and kick them out so they can't come back for a very, very long time. That way, Jupiter protects the inner planets, although sometimes it accidentally sends asteroids or comets into them, causing collisions like maybe the one that made the dinosaurs extinct 65 million years ago. Now, Saturn's rings are the most famous ones in our solar system. They are far-reaching, colorful, and highly visible. You can even see them using a backyard telescope. But some other ice and gas giants also have them too, like Uranus. It has the second most interesting set of rings in our solar system. There are 13 rings, and they're all made of very dark particles that are different sizes. They're most likely young, way younger than Uranus itself. One theory says high-speed impacts shattered one or more moons, and this may have been the matter these rings are formed of. There were way more particles of debris, but only some survived, and today are forming stable zones around Uranus, known as rings. Now, our planet lost 60% of its atmosphere when there was an asteroid impact that, as one theory says, probably created the Moon. The collision between Earth and a Mars-sized rock happened over 4 billion years ago. The debris from all that collected in an orbit around our planet eventually formed the Moon. Now, Venus is home to at least 37 volcanoes that were active recently, which is the first evidence that showed its interior is still geologically active. Previous research discovered that the planet's interior was warm, plus there were ring-like structures. Plumes of extremely hot material deep inside Venus rise through the mantle layer, and that's how these structures form. It's like how plumes form the volcanic areas of the Hawaiian Islands. But scientists think they were just a result of some ancient activities. They believe Venus has cooled enough and drastically slowed down geological activities in its interior by hardening the crust so much that all of the warm materials from deep inside can't get out to the surface. Speaking of volcanic eruptions, Jupiter's moon Io also has them. Our moon is pretty peaceful, but Io has hundreds of volcanoes, and it took the title of the most active moon in our solar system when it comes to volcanoes. If you could go there, you'd see plumes of sulfur that reach up to 190 miles into its atmosphere. Volcanoes there emit 1 ton of particles and gases into space near Jupiter, its parent planet, every second. This could be because Jupiter's strong magnetic field and gravitational force. Io's interior tenses up and relaxes as it orbits Jupiter and gets closer to it and farther away from it, which generates huge amounts of energy, enough for volcanic activity. There are billions of comets in our solar system. Most of them are in the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt. A comet generally consists of rock and ice, at least until it gets closer to the Sun. Then its exterior turns into a cloud of dust and gas, and that's why comets have their specific tails. Pluto's unique surface is a series of domes, peaks, and troughs on the planet's landscape, which may have been formed because of its many large ice volcanoes. Neither erosion nor some other geological activity has done that much, but its ice volcanoes actually push icy material up to the surface. There are also a couple of craters in this area of the hemisphere called New Horizons. Asteroid impacts probably caused these. Plus, these craters aren't that geologically old. Also, the interior of Pluto probably retained heat, which enabled matter rich in water and ice to deposit onto the surface. And those specific structures I mentioned before could have formed because the water was rising up from the interior of the planet and ended up being rapidly frozen because temperatures on Pluto are extremely low, in addition to atmospheric pressures. Uranus is the second least dense planet in our solar system. The least dense one is Saturn. Now, even though Saturn is 14.5 times as massive as our planet, it's still less dense than water. This means that Saturn would float in a pool if it was more than 37,000 miles wide, so the planet would have enough space to even be in there. Whoa, that's a big pool. Now back to Uranus. Since its density level is so low, you probably experienced less than 90% of its gravity, assuming you could even set foot on its cloud tops. Now Mars has pretty crazy dust storms, the biggest ones in our solar system actually. They can blanket the whole planet and last for months. One theory says these huge storms start because dust particles absorb sunlight and warm the atmosphere of the red planet. Warm pockets of air form and they start flowing toward colder areas. This generates winds. These powerful winds lift more and more dust off the ground. This again heats the planet's atmosphere, creates more wind, and kicks up even more dust. Wow, better have a broom handy, maybe even two.
Recently, Chinese scientists discovered something interesting on the moon, an unusual crystal. Moreover, they found out that this crystal contains an element that can literally replace nuclear fuel. Let's find out more. The composition of the moon has long remained a mystery to us. Half a century has already passed since the Apollo mission. Unfortunately, we haven't traveled to the moon much since then. So it's not surprising that it's not so easy for us to study it. But recently, we've made a breakthrough in this area. In December 2020, Chinese scientists sent the Chang'e 5 probe to the moon. The mission was named after the ancient Chinese deity of the moon, Chang'e. Quite poetic, isn't it? Anyway, after the probe went to the nearest side of the moon, it spent several days digging through the surface and rocks and then returned to Earth. In total, it collected about 4 pounds of various lunar rocks, like basalt, solidified lava, and so on. And yeah, maybe it doesn't sound too impressive, but it's actually a mini breakthrough. After all, we hadn't received any lunar samples since 1976. And these samples are very important for learning the history of our world. We've been struggling for many years to find out, for example, how the moon was born at all. Yes, there were a lot of theories, but we still couldn't find any proper evidence for any of them. But thanks to the latest missions and some computer simulations, scientists finally found out the truth. The moon was born when some random dwarf planet crashed into our Earth many millions of years ago. This dwarf planet was slightly smaller than Mars. the fragments of the Earth went into space, but some of them stayed in our orbit. Then they stuck together and formed the Moon. It sounds horrifying, but in reality, the birth of the Moon was the best thing to ever happen to our planet. If it weren't for this beautiful satellite, all our oceans would be small puddles. Life wouldn't have appeared on Earth at all. So this is already an amazing discovery, but that's still not all. Studying the collected rocks, scientists from the Beijing Research Institute discovered something unusual, a rare lunar crystal. Looks pretty boring, doesn't it? Just some tiny transparent monocrystal about the thickness of a human hair. We've already found such things on the Moon before. These crystals were formed as a result of volcanic activity, just like some garnets on the Earth. And yep, the place where they discovered these crystals also suffered from volcanoes 1.2 billion years ago. That means that this tiny baby is over 1 billion years old. But that's not the most important thing. It's the fact that this crystal is made of a unique material, the one that we've never seen before. Researchers from the International Mineralogical Association have confirmed that such a composition can't be found anywhere on Earth. The crystal was named chongasite, again after the same moon deity. And this is another achievement. This is the 6th previously unknown mineral that we've found on the Moon and the first one found by China. Now, it has become the 3rd country in the world to make such a lunar discovery. However, this tiny crystal still wasn't the only remarkable thing they found. After studying this gem and about 140,000 other lunar particles, scientists have discovered something else. They found helium-3. Why is it so important? Because this is one of the elements that feed the sun and other stars in our universe. We tend to say stuff like, put out the sun is burning, and so on. And this is one of the reasons why many people actually think that the sun is a huge fireball. But it's not. Its burning is actually a completely different process, which is called nuclear fusion. The process itself is quite simple. During this reaction, hydrogen in the star turns into helium. But this simple process is actually one of the most violent and insane reactions in the universe. There's a real boiling broth of particles inside the sun. The hydrogen nuclei that jump and rush there are constantly repelling each other since all of them are positively charged. And so they could continue to boil and chill around without bothering anyone if it weren't for the stars. The stars turned out to be cheaters. They have such strong gravity that they basically grab billions of these little atoms and squeeze them together. Combining with each other, these atoms create new heavy elements, like the mentioned helium. And when this happens, they throw a lot of energy into space. And that's how the sun burns. At the same time, it spreads so much energy that we can't even imagine. Okay, so what is helium-3? Well, this is an element to which even the sun can say, "Whoa dude, you should calm down." The fusion of helium-3 atoms releases even more energy than in typical nuclear fusion. And most importantly, it doesn't pollute the atmosphere with harmful things like radiation. We have very, very little helium-3 on Earth. Its prevalence in our atmosphere is about 1 in a million. And besides, it's constantly trying to escape from us back into space. Probably feels some bad vibes from us. However, scientists have recently found out that there's a place that contains a lot of this element. Yep, you guessed it, it's the Moon. We think that there's more helium-3 on the Moon than on Earth because of the solar winds. The sun has been hammering on the Moon with its helium-3 for billions of years, so now it's all over the place. It's still not too much if you compare it, for example, with Jupiter or Saturn. But don't forget how much energy it can release. For your information, with only 25 tons of helium-3, it's possible to provide America with energy for an entire year. Now, there are 35,000 tons of it here on Earth, and more than 1 million tons on the Moon. Only these sources could feed the entire US for thousands of years. So basically, in the future, helium-3 may become a new source of fuel. And it's better than nuclear fuel in basically everything. Helium-3 won't leave any harmful waste and radiation. It's more powerful and not that dangerous. In other words, this environmentally friendly and efficient energy could be a revolution for our planet. Sounds cool, huh? So, what are we waiting for? Grab the shovels, you might say. But there's a little problem here. Unfortunately, we haven't yet come up with anything as wildly strong and hot as the stars. To use helium-3, we need crazy temperatures and pressure. We need a thermonuclear reactor, and we have no idea how to build it, yet. And even if we could heat it up to such temperatures and get the needed pressure, we still don't really know how to handle helium-3 correctly. Therefore, even if we have an infinite amount of helium-3, we still won't be able to use it. But still, there's a great power behind helium-3, so it's not surprising that different countries have already started a race for nuclear resources. Now that Chang'e 5 has discovered a new helium-3 deposit on the nearest side of the moon, this race can become downright global. For example, China already plans a new lunar mission in 2024, Chang'e 6. During this mission, they want to collect the first samples from the far side of the moon. As you can see, finding this lunar crystal was very important for us. These crystals can help us find new ways to create helium-3. And if we manage to do that, humankind will enter a new era. But to do this, we still have to solve a number of problems. How to deliver a bunch of these lunar crystals to Earth, how to make them produce energy, and so on. Let's hope that in the future these issues will be resolved and we'll find a way to produce clean, safe, unlimited energy.
Back when Apollo missions were launched, astronauts returning from the moon claimed that moon dust, the gray sand-like dust covering much of the satellite surface, smelled and tasted, yes, they actually tasted it, like gunpowder. What the stuff moon dust is made of is nothing like gunpowder. About half of its composition is silicon dioxide glass from impacts with meteorites. They hit the surface of the moon at incredible speeds. Whoa! The high temperature makes the topsoil fuse into glass, and the impact shatters it right afterwards, creating the gray and clingy dust. The rest of moon dust ingredients are minerals such as iron, calcium, and magnesium, while old-fashioned gunpowder consists mainly of saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur. In other words, moon dust shouldn't smell like gunpowder, but it does. Besides, when astronauts brought samples of it back to Earth, there was no smell left at all. One explanation could be that the moon is similar, in a way, to Earth's sand deserts, like the Sahara. It's extremely dry and arid. When you sniff the air in a desert, you don't smell anything. But if you get caught in the rain there, the moisture will raise all kinds of odors from the ground that were previously trapped in the dry sand. With moon dust, it might be similar. While on the surface of the moon, it doesn't smell at all. Not that the astronauts could sniff at it wearing their spacesuits, though. But when brought back inside the landing module, the dust came into contact with moisture in the air and started emitting its strange odor. Another reason for this could be a reaction of moon dust to the solar wind. Ionized particles from the sun hit the bare surface of the moon and stay there. There's no thick atmosphere to protect it from those ions, so they travel freely right to the ground. They're very lightweight, so they can fly off and sort of evaporate from the slightest of nudges. And when astronauts took the moon dust samples to the landing module, those particles could have started moving around and giving off the specific smell. This might also explain why the samples didn't keep their odor when brought back to Earth. Since the particles are so light, they might have flown off the samples already in the landing module. And when they were placed in airtight containers, there were little or no ions left on them. Another explanation is that those airtight containers weren't so airtight after all. Moon dust is basically very small crystals with extremely sharp edges. They unexpectedly made tiny cuts in the seals, letting in air and moisture, and so the ionized particles leaked out of the containers. Scientists believe they should study moon dust on the surface of the moon itself to find out everything about its properties. Now, there are hundreds of thousands of craters on the surface of the moon made by falling asteroids, but one of them drew a lot of attention. It turned out to not be just an impact crater, but a tube, looking most like an entrance to a cave system. Scientists found a specific echo pattern that suggested there was a hollow area beneath. They discovered more echo patterns at a couple of places near the hole, so there could be more lunar tubes there. But in this big tube, you could place an entire football field. Researchers believe there could be an entire geological wonderland under the surface. It could be a good shelter for astronauts landing on the moon, or even be a harbor for a lunar colony. No one ever managed to stay on the moon for more than 3 days because of the conditions on the satellite. Wide range of temperatures, low atmosphere, no magnetic field would protect life on the surface from things like radiation or solar wind. Astronauts wear spacesuits. They can't protect them over long periods of time, but a lava tube could. When a lava flow cools, it gets a hard crust, which later thickens and creates a roof over that same lava. It continues to flow, but when it stops, the channel can drain, and that's how an empty tube appears. Our planet also has lava tubes, but they're not as big as the one found on the moon. Back in 1178, I wasn't around then, at least 5 people in England claimed they had seen the moon split into 2 from its upper tip. It was in the shape of a crescent at the time of the event. When the crack widened, fire started blazing from it, which the single monk who chronicled it described it as a flaming torch sprang up, spewing out fire, hot coals, and sparks. Then the moon started shifting around and pulsating, but soon stopped and turned a slightly darker shade. The event didn't receive much attention from scientists, though, until the second half of the 20th century. Researchers studied the chronicle and figured out there was a huge 14-mile-wide crater on the surface of the moon at about the spot described in the book. Only a very large asteroid could have left such a scar on the satellite's face. And when they investigated it more closely, they found out it was pretty recent by astronomical standards. In fact, it really could have appeared about 800 years ago. But in that case, millions of fragments from the asteroid and the moon would have hit the Earth as well, and then people would have seen an incredible meteor shower. It would have been very bright, and the memories of it would have definitely been in the archives. But that didn't happen. In addition, many scientists argue that the crater isn't as young as it might seem. The most popular and justified theory is that it's about 1 to 10 million years old. If it had appeared as recently as 800 years ago, parts of the surface of the moon in and around the crater would still have been warm from the impact. The most likely explanation of what really happened back in 1178 is that observers were extremely lucky to see an asteroid falling towards the Earth and burning in our planet's atmosphere. The spectacle would have been incredible, and seen from a proper angle, the burst of the asteroid could have really looked like it was the moon exploding. That would explain why there were so few witnesses of the phenomenon. The right spot to see the show, as they did, was only a couple of miles wide. As for real events on the moon, water and oxygen were unexpectedly discovered on it not long ago. Water might have been brought to the satellite by asteroids hitting its surface, many of them carrying H2O molecules, and those that are left on the moon in tiny amounts after the impact. There's precious little water there, though. By comparison, even the Sahara Desert has more of it than the entire moon. Oxygen is also present as separate molecules floating around, so you still can't breathe on the moon. Solar wind brought them there. Waves of energy from the sun travel at extremely high speeds through space, scrape oxygen from the upper parts of our atmosphere, and carry it further. Eventually, the wind with the oxygen molecules reaches the moon. And that's where something incredible happens. The moon starts rusting. There's plenty of iron in the lunar soil, and when it's exposed to oxygen and water, it naturally rusts. Some parts of the moon have actually already turned slightly reddish. They're regions where there's the highest concentration of molecules. If this process goes on long enough, in the distant future, the moon will look like Mars. It will turn orange-red. Yes, the signature color of Mars came exactly from the corrosion that began there thousands and thousands of years ago, when there were rivers and seas with water and an atmosphere with oxygen. Another unusual phenomenon is the blue and red lights on the moon. They can be seen when it's crescent-shaped. The flashes come and go very quickly, almost like lightning. And in fact, that's what they basically are, electric bursts. Tidal forces are to blame for this. They cause mechanical stress buildup in the rocks. This can produce an electric field. which creates the blue flashes that have surprised many amateur astronomers. But still, there's so far been no green cheese discovered there, or moon pies for that matter. Disappointing, I know.
Soon we might start constructing loads of stuff on the moon. All because India's moon mission has recently detected sulfur near the moon's south pole. This chemical element can come in extremely handy for creating infrastructure on our satellite. It's the first time this chemical element has been discovered on Earth's natural satellite. This sought-after element is mostly found near Earth's volcanoes. Its appearance on the moon speaks volumes about the satellite's volcanic history and its past atmospheric conditions. The mission's rover detected this chemical element less than a week after touching down around 70 degrees from the moon's south pole on the 23rd of August, 2023. This historic landing on the lunar surface made India the fourth country to safely land a mission on the moon. It's also the first spacecraft to touch down so close to the south pole of our satellite. It's an area of strategic importance because it's believed to be home to deposits of water ice. If it turns out to be true, future missions might be able to harvest it and turn this water ice into drinking water or even rocket fuel. For 2 weeks, the lander carried out the data collection, mainly focused on the analysis of the moon's soil and its extremely thin atmosphere. Meanwhile, the solar-powered Pragyan rover started its quest to find frozen water on the moon. As for the lander, it demonstrated another amazing feat on the 3rd of September. The spacecraft fired up its engines and lifted itself for about 16 inches into the air. Then it made a tiny hop to land 12 to 16 inches away from its original position. It's kinda a big deal. Being able to get a lander back off the surface of the moon is essentially for future missions, showing that they can safely return soil samples or even astronauts back home after a lunar mission. In September, the Indian spacecraft was put into sleeping mode. The 14-day-long lunar night was approaching, and the spacecraft wasn't designed to collect scientific data during this period of time. So far, we've learned about a few major findings of the mission. One is related to measuring the temperature of the moon's topsoil at different depths. Intriguingly, the surface of the satellite in that region turned out to be hotter than expected. It was believed that the temperature could be between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, but it was around 158 degrees Fahrenheit, way hotter than it should be. The other discovery indicates the presence of several chemical elements, including oxygen. Besides, the data received from the spacecraft confirms the presence of aluminum, calcium, iron, titanium, silicon, and other chemical elements on the lunar surface close to the South Pole. The rover also used special instruments designed to measure quakes and rumbles beneath the lunar surface to detect some seismic activity. It brings us back to the sulfur detected thanks to the rover's spectroscope. Scientists are currently working on figuring out whether this element formed on the surface in a natural way or whether it's the result of volcanic activity or a meteor strike. Another astonishing thing found on the moon is a rock, and it may be the oldest known Earth rock. A 0.7-inch wide chip included in a large rock collection brought to our planet by Apollo astronauts might actually be a 4-billion-year-old fragment of Earth. This finding could help us paint a better picture of the intense pounding early Earth got at the dawn of its life. It could go like this. Soon after the rock formed, an asteroid impact might have blasted it from Earth. At that time, our planet's satellite was 3 times closer to Earth than it is today. The collision was so powerful that this chunk of terrestrial rock found its way to the moon. Later, this fragment got engulfed in a lunar breccia, a motley kind of rock. Eventually, the rock was brought back home to Earth by Apollo 14 astronauts. Even though scientists had found meteorites coming from Mars and the Moon before, it was the first time a rock from the Moon turned out to be a terrestrial meteorite. They also found out that the rock had formed in a water-rich environment at temperatures and pressures corresponding to those at around 12 miles beneath the surface of our planet. In 2019, China's Chang'e 4 mission made history by landing on the far side of the Moon. The mission's rover helped researchers visualize structures hidden deep below the surface of the satellite, revealing billions of years of lunar history. The Yutu-2 rover made this discovery with the help of its lunar penetrating radar. It imaged deep into the Moon's surface and listened to echoes of sound bouncing back off structures hidden from view under the surface of the Moon. It turned out those structures were resting at depths of almost 1,000 feet. The research suggests that the first 130 feet under the surface are made up of layers of dust, soil, and rocks. The instruments also discovered a concealed crater that must have formed after a large object slammed into the Moon's surface. Long, long ago, ancient lava was likely to be flowing deep underground. Researchers believe that the broken rocks around the formation might be debris produced by the impact. They also found that the volcanic rock layers were thinner the closer they were to the surface. Such a thickness variation of lava flows might mean a decrease in the number and magnitude of eruptions over time. So, lunar volcanic activity gradually dwindled since the Moon's formation around 4.5 billion years ago. On the far side of the Moon, there is one of the largest and oldest impact craters in our solar system, the South Pole Aitken Basin. Unfortunately, from Earth, you can only see its outer rim, which looks like a huge chain of mountains. It's a ginormous 8-mile deep dent, stretching for more than 1,500 miles in diameter and covering 1/4 of the Moon's surface. Astronomers are sure that this crater appeared when an asteroid collided with the Moon around 4 billion years ago. And now, look at this gigantic chunk of metal the size of 4 states of Connecticut. As for its weight in pounds, it's enough to say that the number contains 18 zeros. This mysterious mass is hidden about 180 miles under the Moon's surface, somewhere in the middle of the South Pole Aitken Basin. It was discovered when GRAIL, which stands for NASA's Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory mission, gathered data about our natural satellite. When examining this information, scientists noticed that in one place on the Moon's surface, there was a weird change in gravity. After researching this phenomenon, they concluded that something mysterious was weighing down the basin floor there. So far, researchers haven't figured out the origin of the bizarre lump, but there are several theories. One of them claims that the finding is a chunk of dense oxide, which appeared when the Moon was just taking its shape. At that time, the satellite was still covered with ancient oceans of magma, and the lump could be formed at the final stages of its cooling. However, most scientists support another theory, according to which the puzzling mass is part of the giant asteroid that once created the South Pole Aitken Basin. Since the thing is metallic, it's probably the iron-nickel core of the asteroid. There might be a labyrinth of lava tubes on the Moon. Not so long ago, astronomers received the results of underground topography and discovered a massive cave under the surface of Earth's satellite. It could be the result of the lunar volcanic activity that happened more than 3 billion years ago. Streams of lava hardened, creating a thick, hard crust on the outside. But inside, it kept flowing, melting the rock and creating tunnels and caves. Numerous small pits in the Moon's surface discovered by NASA seem to be the openings to such lava tubes. If this theory is confirmed, the underground tunnels might serve not only as a convenient location for human-crewed space missions, but also as much-needed water sources for astronauts. You might think high-tech telescopes let us see every inch of the Moon, but that's not true. At our satellite's south pole lie giant craters untouched by sunlight for eons, stuck in pitch black, colder than Pluto, and almost impossible to explore. However, maybe we have to if we want to explore space. Because the darkness hides some must-have resources that will make life and long-distance travel in space possible. Yes, we're talking about water locked up as tiny crystals in the lunar soil. Now, water in space is always good news. You've probably heard that scientists are also obsessed with finding it on Mars. If the red planet has any type of water below its surface, it raises the exciting possibility that life might have existed there. Even microbes would be the biggest discovery in human history. That's why rovers are poking around Martian craters and drilling into the soil like some very dedicated space gardeners. But as incredible as water on Mars would be, water on the Moon might be even more valuable to us in the short term. The reasons are simple: the distance and the gravity of the Moon. We can reach our satellite in 3 days. That's almost nothing. It takes at least 7 days to reach New York from London via a cruise ship. But more important than the length of the trip is the possibility of using the Moon as a pit stop. Stop, refuel, and relaunch so we can resume exploration. The gravity on the Moon is only 1/6 as strong as Earth's. That's not just useful for endlessly entertaining yourself by jumping around. This difference means that launching rockets from our satellite is much easier compared to launching them from Earth, which requires a tremendous amount of fuel just to break free from the atmosphere. For example, the Saturn V rocket, which took astronauts to the Moon during the Apollo missions, was made up of more than 90% fuel just to get off the ground. On the Moon, however, it's much easier to launch a rocket. That means that we could carry heavier loads with less fuel. It's like being able to take a bigger suitcase on your trip. If we can find and use ice on the Moon to create rocket fuel, it would turn our satellite into a practical and affordable stop for exploring the solar system. Not to mention that by applying some basic chemistry, we could extract oxygen from water and use it for breathing or rocket engines. Also, astronauts would need water to drink and grow crops on the lunar base. So, what do we know about the latest discoveries? For a long time, scientists thought the Moon was completely dry. But in 2009, NASA basically crashed a rocket into a crater. It caused an explosion of ice and vapor, like fireworks, and finally confirmed that the Moon had some kind of water. But how much? Well, enough to matter. The data suggests there could be hundreds of millions of tons of water ice locked up in the Moon's polar regions. Some estimates roughly say 1.3 trillion pounds. That's about the same weight as 460 million cars. Not exactly lakes, but still a lot. And there still could be more. This water could also contribute to uncovering cool scientific secrets. The ice is ancient, which makes it like a time capsule from the early days of the solar system. Studying those frozen molecules might tell us not only how water got to the Moon, but also how it appeared on Earth. Anyway, what's all that water doing on the Moon? How did it get there? Scientists assume that some of it probably hitched a ride on comets and asteroids billions of years ago. Many of those space rocks carried ice, and some of that water ended up in the polar regions. Another source could be the way solar wind interacts with the lunar surface. In any case, however this ice appeared on the Moon, the real trick is where it ended up, inside its polar craters. And while we can find the ice not only in the craters at the South Pole, that's where the largest, most stable reserves are believed to be. Some of those craters are enormous. One of the most famous is called the Shackleton crater, and it's over 13 miles wide and more than 2 miles deep. That's almost twice as deep as the Grand Canyon. The Moon barely tilts on its axis, only about 1 degree, so the sun never peaks over the rims of those deep polar pits. The temperatures dip to around -400 degrees Fahrenheit there. Any water or chemicals trapped in that frozen dirt just stay there, locked away like in a freezer. Something really cool is that at the South Pole, you have parts that are stuck in the perpetual darkness, but some nearby mountain ridges get almost non-stop sunlight. Scientists call them the peaks of eternal light. They are perfect for setting up solar panels, while still being close enough to access the icy treasures hidden below. The poles of the moon are the only places in our solar system we know of where perpetual day and night exist side by side. But the eternal night isn't just fascinating, it's dangerous. The terrain out there is absolutely unforgiving. We can't even simulate something like that on Earth. We don't even know what it looks like from the inside. It's worse than exploring the northernmost part of Antarctica while wearing a blindfold. So now that we know this, is that potential water even obtainable? That question is probably worth several trillions of dollars. Yes, there's water over there, but getting to it won't be like scooping ice cream from a bowl. What we're really talking about are microscopic ice crystals mixed into lunar dust. To make use of it, machines would need to dig and heat up the soil, then capture the vapor before it escapes back into space. And then there's freezing. Even assuming a human or rover could safely reach the bottom of a crater, it'd be almost impossible to navigate. Batteries and equipment probably wouldn't last, and it's impossible to use solar panels or electronics down there. They'd freeze in minutes. However, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter uses all kinds of radars and sensors to sniff out what the crater looks like inside. And now there's an even sharper tool, ShadowCam. A camera so sensitive it can capture details in light 100 times dimmer than what our eyes can see. Basically, the ultimate night vision device. With it, we can finally map those pits without even setting foot there. That's why engineers are thinking up all sorts of clever solutions. Some concepts involve nuclear-powered rovers with headlights strong enough to carve through the dark. Others want robots that rappel down crater walls or hop across the floor like pogo sticks. There are even ideas for drills that could melt frozen soil and trap water vapor like condensation on a cold soda can. The silver lining is that this water isn't going anywhere. Until we improve our technology, the supply will wait for us. That being said, space agencies are already making advancements. In fact, more than half a dozen new missions are lined up over the next few years. NASA's Artemis program is getting ready to send astronauts back around the moon and then down to the South Pole. China's Chang'e 7 is planning to check out those dark craters. And private companies like Firefly and Blue Origin are gearing up to deliver equipment and experiments. Now, here's a bonus, lesser-known fun fact. The moon smells. When Apollo astronauts brought lunar dust into their landers, it mixed with the oxygen inside and ended up smelling pretty strong. They said it was like burnt gunpowder or fireworks. Lunar dust has nothing to do with gunpowder, but its particles are highly reactive. After sitting in space for billions of years, they reacted instantly with oxygen in the cabin, creating that smoky odor. Future explorers are definitely going to notice that smell too, since lunar dust tends to stick to everything. Let's hope that, aside from everything else, scientists will work out air fresheners for the moon base.
You know, our planet can be absolutely breathtaking if you know where to look. From Greenland's green waves to deserts glowing like molten gold, the planet looks like living art. But there's something even better than knowing what to look for. It's knowing where to look from. For example, from a few hundred miles above the ground, where satellites are, so you can see faces in deserts, hearts in sand, spirals, skulls, and mirror lakes flashing sunlight straight back into space. These are some of the weirdest things you can see from space. In the middle of the Sahara Desert, satellites once caught sight of something meant to scare visitors from outer space. It's a colossal skull staring right up at the sky. Its hollow eye sockets, long nose ridge, and cracked outline looked eerily human, almost as if something enormous had been fossilized beneath the sand. The photo spread quickly online, with people wondering if it could be the remains of an ancient giant, a lost monument, or even evidence of a civilization swallowed by the desert ages ago. But in this case, the truth is climactic. The skull is no fossil or ruin. It's the remains of an ancient volcanic pit carved out by a massive eruption hundreds of thousands of years ago. Over time, relentless desert winds carved away the softer layers of rock, while the tougher ones held firm, leaving behind ridges, pits, and hollows. When sunlight hits it just right, those shadows fall perfectly into place, completing the illusion of a face. Down in the Namib Desert, there's an incredible natural wonder. Fairy circles, roughly circular, bare patches in the grasslands. From above, it looks like a perfect circle cut into the sandy landscape, surrounded by shimmering golden dunes. Some people thought it might be an ancient crater, or even a ritual site hidden by shifting sands. Others guessed it could be the mark of a long-extinct lake, or a meteorite that fell millions of years ago. But the real explanation might be even more fascinating. The formation lies in a region famous for fairy circles, thousands of mysterious round patches scattered across Namibia. For decades, no one knew what caused them. Then, researchers discovered the patterns seemed to emerge naturally, shaped by wind, roots, and even termite colonies competing for scarce water. Over time, these small circles can merge into larger perfect rings, like the ones satellites now call the heart of the desert. The desert is a sight to behold on the ground, but from space, the sheer size of it will make you pause. In the heart of the Canadian Badlands, satellites can see a formation that strikingly resembles a human face, seemingly resting sideways in the soil. This quirky landmark is called the Badlands Guardian by locals. The coincidence is also great. Imagine if you could see a guy wearing a Roman helmet while looking at Italy from space. The contours create what appears to be a forehead, an eye, a nose, and even lips. Some folks amusingly insist that they can see a pair of headphones resting in the ear. For years, people speculated about its origin, pondering whether it was an ancient artifact or a colossal sculpture hidden beneath the surface. However, unless we are proven otherwise, we must believe that the Guardian is actually a natural formation, shaped by the relentless forces of wind and rain over millennia. But the headphones are real. Okay, that's a joke. They're simply a road and an oil well pad constructed long after nature had woven this artwork. Now, what makes this illusion even cooler is the play of sunlight. Depending on the angle, shadows play around in the gullies and ridges, making the face look almost real. It's an amazing natural effect, a mix of light and erosion. You could say it's our brain's knack for seeing faces everywhere. But come on, just look at it. Near Egypt's Red Sea coast, satellites once revealed something that looked almost too perfect to be natural. A massive spiral design carved into the desert floor. Thousands of sand mounds and depressions arranged in hypnotic precision, stretching wider than a city block. Well, let's speculate. It could be something left after visitors from other planets, or maybe a forgotten symbol from an ancient civilization. Now, theories spread fast. Some said it might be a secret military installation or a message meant for the skies. Others wondered if it was another one of those unexplained desert geoglyphs, like the Nazca lines in Peru. But when artists came forward, the mystery got solved. It's a bit anticlimactic. The spirals turned out to be part of Desert Breath, a massive art installation built back in 1997 by 3 artists who wanted to make something that could only be fully seen from above. Over 1 million square feet of sand were sculpted into smooth cones and hollows, designed to slowly fade away over time as wind reclaimed the land. Ironically, that's exactly why it still fools people today. From orbit, the desert's light and shadows preserve its shape perfectly, making it look brand new every time the sun hits it. It's one of those rare creations where art, time, and nature work together. The pattern is still mesmerizing, and if visitors came from above, they'd be sure to admire it, baffled as we were. Meanwhile, far out on the coastal plains of Peru, satellites revealed something absolutely unbelievable. Etched into the desert are enormous figures. From the ground, you can't see them properly, but from above, they turn into another large-scale art. There's a hummingbird, a monkey, and probably the most famous of them all, a spider. The eight-legged creature is so perfectly drawn, it looks like it's crawling across the earth. The spider alone spans about 150 feet from leg to leg, and what's strange is that it matches a species found deep in the Amazon rainforest hundreds of miles away. So, how could people 2,000 years ago know what it looked like so clearly and carve it into the ground with that kind of precision? Well, theories flooded in. Some claimed the lines were messages to deities watching from the heavens. Others thought they might mark the paths of underground waters or serve as ritual sites to call for rain. But the leading explanation today is both clever and beautiful. The Nazca people scraped away the dark gravel coating the desert to expose lighter soil beneath, creating enormous white outlines that have survived for centuries thanks to the desert's dry, windless climate. The Nazca lines were never meant to be seen from the ground, at least not by wingless humans, but now we have satellites and it's breathtaking. Now, over in China's Gobi Desert, satellites once captured a series of bizarre geometric patterns etched into the sand. Huge grids, bright white lines, and crosshatching that go on for miles. When they first popped up on Google Earth, they went viral. People thought they were looking at gigantic runways, coded symbols, or even the remnants of a lost civilization. Some even speculated they might be a message meant for visitors from space. Well, eventually, experts figured out that those massive lines were actually satellite calibration targets used by China to check the accuracy of their military and remote sensing satellites. Those bright white patterns reflect sunlight really well, helping instruments measure distance, focus, and orientation from way up in orbit. The shapes are really large. Some are over a mile wide and set up in perfect right angles that would impress any perfectionist. They're made for cameras thousands of miles above, not for human eyes. From the ground, they just look like stretches of gravel and stone, but from space, they turn into some of the most precise targets ever created by people. There's more, but that's for some other video. For example, the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania, a massive 25-mile-wide spiral that looks like a portal burned into the desert. Or the boiling Danakil Depression in Ethiopia, glowing in neon golds and greens like it's from another planet entirely. It's kind of cool that you can observe works of art just by zooming in a bit, like it's all just a matter of perspective. Voyager 1, which has been traveling through interstellar space for more than 45 years and is trailing a long gray beard by this time, not really. It suddenly began to send strange signals to Earth. Even more bizarre, there are no signs that the probe has broken or anything. Scientists from NASA are desperately trying to find the reason. So, what's happened exactly? First of all, let me tell you a bit more about Voyager 1 and its long journey. Voyager 1 is an American space probe. Scientists from NASA sent it into space on September 5, 1977. Voyager's goal was to explore the outer planets of our solar system, namely Jupiter and Saturn. Initially, scientists assumed that the mission would take about 5 years. Haha, the joke's on them. The probe exceeded all expectations. Not only did it fulfill its mission, but it's still working for much longer than expected. Voyager 1 has been wandering around space for more than 45 years. It's hard to estimate what Voyager 1 has done for science. Firstly, it successfully sent a lot of photos of Jupiter and Saturn to Earth. By the way, you can even check out these photos yourself. All of them are published on the NASA website. Thanks to Voyager, we also discovered several new moons of Jupiter and a previously unknown system of its rings. We learned that Jupiter's famous red spot is actually a giant superfast storm. And after leaving Neptune's orbit behind, Voyager also sent a lot of important data about interstellar plasma. So Voyager 1 successfully proved to scientists how useful it was. After that, it happily headed for its next goal, the Kuiper Belt and the heliosphere. The Kuiper Belt is a ring of icy bodies that extends from Neptune to a distance of approximately 50 AU from the Sun. It's kind of similar to the asteroid belt, but about 20 times wider and 100 times heavier. And the heliosphere is an area around the Sun where the pressure of the solar wind is balanced with the pressure of interstellar gas. Yeah, I know, it sounds like some hard scientific stuff. Just keep in mind that this data really helps us understand the universe as a whole. So, this is Voyager's last task, to tell us more about interstellar space. The probe has already sent us more than 60 frames for a mosaic of the solar system from a distance of over 4 billion miles from Earth. Scientists used these frames to make a big colored picture. The photo was called the pale blue dot, and you've probably already guessed what that dot is. Yep, that's what our Earth looks like through Voyager's eyes. This photo clearly shows how tiny we really are, and how precious and fragile our planet is. But Voyager 1 also has another, even more important mission, to tell other civilizations about us humans. You might have heard about the famous Voyager Golden Records. People created many audio and video files and added them to these records. There are a few sections. The first one contains hello in 55 languages, including ancient and extinct ones. Almost 80% of the recordings are different musical pieces, like Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Stravinsky, folk music from different countries and ages, and a bit of the blues, like famous songs by Louis Armstrong and Chuck Berry. The remaining 20% of the recordings contain different human voices, sounds of nature and animals, as well as 116 images encoded as audio signals. There's also recordings of speeches by Kurt Waldheim, a former UN Secretary General, and Jimmy Carter, a former US President. These are just some friendly messages. In addition to the records, scientists also packed a needle for playing them. Don't worry, they also left a simple drawing that showed how to use all this stuff and how to translate the sounds into pictures. They added Earth's coordinates, which they created using a pulsar map. It shows the position of the Sun in the Milky Way. The record was packed in an aluminum case and covered with gold to protect it against radiation and cosmic dust. Carrying this record, Voyager 1 set off on its long journey, and it has already traveled quite a distance, I'd say. Right now, Voyager 1 is 154 astronomical units away from us. That's about 14.5 billion miles. This makes it the most remote human-made object. Initially, this title belonged to the Pioneer 10 mission, but Voyager overtook it in 1998. What a bargain for NASA! It's way beyond its best-by date. Voyager 1 is actually so cool that it even overtook its twin brother, Voyager 2, which, by the way, had been sent into space 2 weeks earlier. Voyager 1 moves at a speed of 9.7 miles per second. That's 35,000 miles per hour. Even the fastest sports car in the world travels at a speed of only 305 miles per hour. So it's hard to imagine the speed of Voyager. Anyway, at the moment, Voyager is heading to the borders of the Oort cloud. That's the name of a hypothetical layer of icy objects surrounding the solar system. Astronomers haven't confirmed its existence yet, but they're almost sure it's there. After all, even black holes were only a theory not so long ago. Unfortunately, Voyager 1 won't return back to the solar system. It'll keep in touch with Earth at least until 2025. But eventually, we'll lose the connection with it for good. In 300 years, it'll reach the borders of the Oort cloud. And in 30,000 years, I won't be around then, it'll finally leave the solar system. And if nothing happens to it along the way, in another 10,000 years, Voyager 1 will approach red dwarf star Gliese 445 in the Giraffe constellation. In the future, the probe will probably keep wandering around the Milky Way galaxy. And now, let's finally discuss the mysterious signals part. So, what happened? Well, a rather unusual thing. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which monitors and controls both Voyagers, reported this problem in May 2022. Our veteran spacecraft suddenly began sending strange data to Earth. The whole situation puzzles even engineers from NASA. Now, I bet you're thinking, come on, the thing just probably broke down or something. But the truth is that Voyager 1 is totally fine. It works as usual, receives and carries out commands from Earth, and collects and sends scientific data. But the readings of the AACS, which stands for Attitude and Articulation Control Subsystem, don't show what is actually happening to Voyager anymore. This system supports the orientation of the probe in space and helps it keep in touch with Earth. So, basically, the signals mean that the probe's orientation in space is messed up. But scientists claim this is not the case. They know that the source of the antenna signal remains in the same position relative to Earth as planned. The problem hasn't triggered any of the onboard fall protection systems. The probe hasn't even entered safe mode. So, what in the world, or universe, is going on? Suzanne Dodd, the head of the project, says that the problem is not actually that unexpected. After all, Voyager 1 is already 45 years old. The expert admits that what's happening to the probe remains a mystery to them. They don't know exactly where the incorrect data is coming from, and it's unclear how this will affect the operation of Voyager. She adds, though, that it's not that surprising, considering that the probe is in interstellar space. There's a very high level of radiation there. No spacecraft has ever reached that point before. Scientists from NASA say they'll keep closely monitoring the data coming from Voyager 1 until they figure out the problem. If they find it, the management team will try to fix it. Otherwise, the team will have to adapt to the new conditions. It might not be enough just to understand the problem, though. It takes as much as 20 hours and 33 minutes to receive the signal from Voyager, and it takes the same amount of time to respond to it. Well, at least the second spacecraft, Voyager 2, is totally fine, even though it's also currently in interstellar space at a distance of 12 billion miles from Earth. Anyway, we can only wait for news and hope that the problem will be resolved. I actually wonder how much longer can Voyager 1 last? Will it be able to fly to the borders of the Oort cloud in 300 years? What do you think? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments.
This terrifying but very much real image emerged just recently. In it, you can see something that looks like it belongs in a science fiction movie. From far above Earth, aboard the International Space Station, an astronaut captured something astonishing over Louisiana. A gigantic jet blasting upward straight into the sky. It looks as if Earth is sending a signal skyward. Can science explain this eerie phenomenon? Apparently, it can. This energy blast is called a gigantic jet, and it's one of the rarest and most powerful kinds of lightning we know about. Unlike regular lightning, which strikes down toward the ground, gigantic jets shoot up from storm clouds, and they can stretch for more than 50 miles into the sky. Sometimes they even reach the ionosphere, the layer where Earth's atmosphere starts blending into outer space. To give you an idea, space officially starts around 62 miles above sea level, and the ionosphere stretches from about 50 to 400 miles up. Shockingly, scientists have only known about gigantic jets for about 20 years, and we're still figuring out exactly how they work. One theory is that something inside the storm cloud blocks the lightning from escaping downward. So all this pent-up energy looks for another way out and ends up blasting upward into the sky. But honestly, we still don't fully understand why it happens. Gigantic jets are also extremely rare. Scientists think that they happen only around 1,000 times a year on the entire planet. And when they do happen, they carry a lot of energy. We're talking more than 50 times the power of a normal lightning bolt. The strongest gigantic jet ever recorded happened in Oklahoma in May 2018. It was intense, reaching a temperature of 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit and releasing about 60 times more energy than regular lightning. In other words, it was a huge burst of electricity flying straight into the sky. Most of the photos we have of gigantic jets come from satellites or astronauts on the International Space Station. But a few have also been captured from airplanes flying over storms. The latest jaw-dropping image was taken on November 19, 2024, by an astronaut aboard the ISS. At first, the picture wasn't released by NASA or any space agency. But one photographer, known for tracking and photographing rare lightning events, found the photo by accident. He was browsing through a NASA-run website called the Gateway to Astronaut Photography of Earth, which hosts photos taken by astronauts. There, he spotted images showing a giant lightning jet. Eventually, the photos were brought to public attention on February 26, 2025, and they've also been turned into a time-lapse video on YouTube. We still don't know exactly about the exact spot where the jet happened. Thick storm clouds covered the ground in the pictures. But based on where the ISS was flying at the time, the jet probably happened just off the coast of New Orleans. Speaking of other images of the gigantic jets, a photographer living in Puerto Rico was taking pictures of a storm moving through the area. That same storm would later grow into Hurricane Franklin. While watching the skies, he saw something truly amazing. Several massive lightning bolts shooting straight up out of the storm clouds, stopping just below the edge of space. No wonder. According to a 2022 study, gigantic jets happen most often in tropical areas, and they're more likely during fast-growing storms, like Hurricane Franklin. Gigantic jets often end with thin, red, branch-like lightning tendrils. These faint red flashes are very similar to another rare type of lightning called sprites. Those sometimes look like giant glowing jellyfish in the sky. In 2023, an astronomer named Stanislav Kaniansky in Slovakia captured one of the clearest images of a sprite ever. It happened during a thunderstorm over Central Europe on August 14th, and he spotted it near his home. In the photo, you can see a huge glowing red structure with zigzag patterns stretching over 31 miles across the sky. But like all sprites, it only lasted a fraction of a second before fading away. Sprites happen when lightning sends electrical energy upward into the upper part of Earth's atmosphere, instead of just downward like regular lightning. This energy creates glowing strands of plasma, which is basically electrified gas, way up in the ionosphere. Since sprites are so fast and often hidden by thick clouds, they're very hard to photograph. But Kaniansky got lucky. The thunderstorm was about 200 miles away from him, so he had a clear view just above the tops of the storm clouds. That perfect angle helped him capture this stunning phenomenon. There are many different kinds of lightning, and some of them are not only rare but also super dangerous. Let's take ball lightning, for example. It's exactly what it sounds like, a glowing, floating ball of light that appears during thunderstorms. It's also one of the weirdest and most mysterious forms of lightning. People have seen these strange light balls, usually about the size of a grapefruit, slowly spinning or hovering just above the ground. Some even say they've seen them float through closed windows or suddenly appear indoors, then vanish after about 10 seconds. For hundreds of years, no one really knew what caused ball lightning. Scientists had no explanation, and most sightings were based on eyewitness stories. Then, in 2012, someone finally managed to capture ball lightning on camera. Since then, different ideas have come up to explain what ball lightning really is. One of the newest theories suggests that the ball is actually a tight bubble of super compressed air. This compressed air bends and spins white light in all directions, making it look like a glowing ball rolling around in the sky. And according to the researchers, ball lightning can be almost 1 billion times more intense than regular lightning that moves in a straight line. Then there are elves. They look a lot like sprites, but instead of looking like jellyfish or dancing shapes, elves appear as huge glowing rings or halos in the sky. And they're massive. An elf can spread out to be up to 185 miles wide. You can even spot them from space or through thin clouds during the day. Dark lightning is probably one of the strangest types of lightning, and most people don't even know it exists. Unlike regular lightning, it doesn't produce a bright flash. Instead, it gives off intense bursts of radiation, especially gamma rays, the most energetic form of light found in nature. Dark lightning happens when high-speed electrons slam into air molecules inside a storm cloud. This creates a burst of gamma rays. They're so strong that they can mess with satellites hundreds of miles away in space. In rare cases, when a plane flies through a thunderstorm, these flashes can hit the aircraft. Some passengers could get a quick dose of radiation, about the same as a full-body CT scan. But worry not. Scientists say these occasions are extremely rare and not a reason to be afraid of flying. And finally, there's positive lightning. You see, lightning is still kind of a mystery, even for scientists. But here's the basic idea. Inside a storm cloud, tiny pieces of ice bump into each other and build up electric charges. Some become positive, others negative. Most of the lightning we see comes from the bottom of the cloud, where there are lots of negative charges. These reach down and zap the ground. But sometimes, lightning comes from the top of the cloud, where positive charges hang out. That's called positive lightning, and it only makes up about 5 to 10% of lightning strikes. Most of the time, those positive charges just zap other parts of the cloud. But sometimes, they shoot all the way down to the ground. That's why positive lightning can strike even when the sky looks clear, because it comes from way up high in the cloud, sometimes miles away from the storm itself. The scariest part is that regular lightning can reach about 300 million volts, while the charge of positive lightning can be up to 1 billion volts. That means positive lightning is much stronger and more dangerous.
Behold a city-sized power plant built by robotic spiders floating in orbit, transporting energy down to Earth as a beam. To us, it sounds like a crazy sci-fi idea, but for engineers, it's a very real project. The pieces are being tested, and space agencies want to have the whole system online in less than 30 years. Now, it wasn't that long ago that large-scale solar power felt unrealistic. Today, it's widespread and the most affordable form of energy. The biggest solar power plant on the planet, the Golmud Solar Park, has almost 7 million solar panels, and it could produce an unbelievable 2.8 gigawatts of electricity. That's enough to power more than 2 million homes and about twice the energy needed to power the DeLorean time machine from Back to the Future, if you're keeping track. Now, all this sounds great on paper, but in reality, it's a major headache. Large-scale solar power takes up massive amounts of land and needs constant upkeep. More importantly, solar panels on Earth never hit 100% efficiency. Our atmosphere acts like a pair of dirty sunglasses and scatters roughly 30% of the sun's energy before it even reaches the glass. Also, sunlight is unreliable. Remember those puffy things called clouds? Solar panels are like employees who take sick days when it's cloudy, barely work during winter, and sleep every single night. Hey, I had a job like that once. To keep the lights on at night, we have to rely on massive battery systems to cover that gap. Well, that's why engineers started looking for a loophole, or better said, a better location. If you travel about 22,000 miles straight up, you reach a geostationary orbit. This is the cosmic sweet spot. Up there, a satellite stays fixed over the same point on Earth. You get unfiltered sunlight non-stop every single day for a year. Well, almost. Twice a year, around the equinoxes, Earth slips in front of the Sun and throws a shadow across that orbit, creating a short blackout that can last up to 72 minutes. And then the sunshine is back on as if nothing happened. Well, finding a reserved parking spot in a 22,000-mile orbit isn't the hardest part. It's building the thing to do the work there. Depending on the design, NASA wants the structures to be anywhere from a couple of miles to nearly 6 miles across. We can't fit something like that on a rocket. The ISS is about the size of a soccer field and took more than a decade and over 40 launches to assemble. So, engineers are flat-packing it like IKEA furniture. The plan is to launch thousands of identical ultra-thin squares of mirrors and electronics, stacked like dinner plates inside a heavy-lift rocket. Something like this would be impossible for humans to assemble. It would take centuries of going up and down. That's why it's a job for little robots that might look like spiders, crawling over a giant metal web, snapping modules into place until the structure grows into a floating power city. But once the station is assembled, the coolest part is the delivery. You can have a massive amount of electricity stuck in orbit, and they don't really make extension cords and cables that reach up that far. So, engineers would have to turn that electricity into a beam. The station would convert the raw power into microwaves, or in some designs, low-intensity lasers. These are basically the same waves that heat your leftover lasagna. That beam is then aimed at a specific target on the ground. Wait, a beam from space? What if some bird gets in the way? That sounds like something from movies, where a giant laser fries a city. Well, actually, making and using that kind of weapon isn't unrealistic at all. It's just impractical, and the world lacks a proper villain. But this isn't a tight laser pointer. Over the distance that long, the beam naturally spreads, and it's designed to arrive wide for safety and control. So, by the time it reaches the ground, it's almost 4 times weaker than standing outside on a sunny day. And if a bird flew through the beam, it wouldn't go poof into feathers and smoke like in a cartoon. The whole energy beam from out of space isn't just a theory, and it's been tested. In 2023, Caltech's MAPLE experiment successfully beamed power wirelessly in orbit for the first time. They proved you can actually send energy through the void and catch it on the other side. On Earth, we catch it with a rectenna. That sounds high-tech, but visually, it looks like a giant fishing net made of wire mesh stretching for miles. It's not a slab of concrete and is, in fact, almost transparent, so much so that rain falls straight through it. That's because it doesn't need to reflect or block light. It's built to intercept specific microwave lengths. In theory, you could build multiple rectennas and switch targets as the station and Earth line up, like routing a call to a different tower. Right now, the Space Solar Project isn't waiting on some technological breakthrough. It depends more on a bunch of boring things getting cheaper at the same time. The biggest one is launches. A few decades ago, putting 2 pounds into orbit cost tens of thousands of dollars. Today, reusable rockets have cut that price by a lot. The more rockets fly, the cheaper each flight gets. Space Solar only starts to make sense when sending cargo to orbit feels less like a scary moon mission and more like basic freight shipping. The second piece is mass production. These stations aren't crafted like you need spacecraft. Instead, they're more like factories. They're made up of thousands of identical ultra-thin panels, all the same shape and size, with the same connections. It's the kind of stuff you mass-produce in millions, not something workers could assemble by hand. In the meantime, engineers also have to prove that everything can function on a small scale. The tests are already happening in bits and pieces. We're seeing small satellites, short power beams, and demos of autonomous assembly. NASA's own 2024 study models a path where the tech matures in the 2030s. The giant station gets assembled in the 2040s, and power delivery could start around 2050, which is not really that far. Also, breakthroughs can happen and push the project forward in an unexpected way. Now, building a project like this sounds wildly ambitious, but it's actually the first realistic step, just one of many bigger ideas that are still waiting in the far future. For example, what if you don't put the panels in Earth orbit at all? What if you put them closer in instead, where sunlight hits harder and every panel pulls in more energy per square foot? You build a station that lives in permanent daylight, then beams power outward like a lighthouse. One other idea keeps the same beam-it-down concept, but changes the build strategy. Instead of one giant city station, you split it into a whole constellation of smaller power satellites, like cell towers but in orbit. One satellite lines up over a rectenna, beams power down for a while, and then hands off to the next one sliding into position. From the ground, it looks like a relay race in the sky. A chain of satellites marching around the planet, passing the beam from one to the next. And if one unit fails, the whole system doesn't go dark. The rest keep working, while robots swap in a replacement like a flat battery. And then we have the coolest and most famous one, a Dyson swarm. Not a solid shell, but a cloud of millions of collectors orbiting a star, grabbing a huge chunk of its output. If a civilization built that, the star itself could look wrong from far away, like somebody dimmed it on purpose. Any of these ideas belongs to a different era, when building in space is cheaper, easier, and maybe powered by technology we don't even have yet. But one thing is already obvious. From the moment we wake up, we're surrounded by devices that guzzle electricity, and we keep demanding more. So, it's not surprising that, slowly but surely, people are starting to look up at space as the next place to scale energy. For now, all we can do is wait for the next big upgrade. And maybe remember to turn off your devices when not using them. Just saying.